everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
Any evidence? Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt delivered a sharp response during a recent exchange with CNN's Kaitlan Collins, leaving a strong impression. In one of her most direct moments yet, Leavitt challenged the media narrative, prompting a noticeable reaction from Collins. Curious about what went down? I've got all the details, but before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment.
First on the president's post overnight, saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
For those who may not be up to speed, here's a quick recap. From the outset, CNN's Kaitlan Collins set the stage for a tense exchange by pressing White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt on the legal basis behind former President Trump's attempt to reverse President Biden's preemptive pardons. These pardons were reportedly aimed at shielding individuals like Dr. Anthony Fauci from potential prosecution under a future Trump administration. Trump, however, has publicly accused Fauci of misleading the public about the origins of COVID-19 and of playing a role in funding the controversial Wuhan lab. He also blames Fauci's pandemic policies for damaging the economy and restricting personal freedoms. In Trump's view, accountability is long overdue, which is why he has declared Biden's pardon of Fauci invalid, potentially opening the door to legal action. Collins's question was direct. Who gave Trump the authority to overturn Biden's pardons? Karoline Leavitt's response was one to watch.
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Kaitlan. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents.
Karoline Leavitt didn't waste a moment in pushing back against her critics. While Kaitlan Collins focused on the legality of Trump's actions, Leavitt turned the spotlight on President Biden, questioning whether he even understood what he was signing. She argued that Biden's cognitive decline isn't just a political talking point, it's a serious concern. If he struggles to get through a debate without stumbling over his words, she asked, how can he be trusted to issue legally binding pardons? Leavitt didn't pull any punches, referencing Biden's widely criticized debate performance, an event so disastrous that it reportedly left Democrats considering a potential replacement, with Vice President Kamala Harris among the names floated. The conversation quickly shifted from legal technicalities to deeper concerns about possible misconduct within the White House. Leavitt even claimed that some former insiders suspect Biden may not have signed the pardons himself, raising serious questions about who was actually behind the move. But that's not the end of the story. There's still more to uncover.
Any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Never one to back down, Kaitlan Collins pushed back, insisting that President Biden had publicly discussed issuing preemptive pardons. But Karoline Leavitt remained unfazed. She quickly pointed out that simply talking about something doesn't mean it actually happened. We all say we're going to do things, she noted, but how often do we follow through? Plans shift, priorities change, and sometimes, people just forget. Leavitt argued that unless there is clear, documented proof that Biden personally reviewed, understood, and signed those pardons with full mental awareness, Collins's argument begins to fall apart. The real concern, she said, isn't whether Biden mentioned the idea, it's whether he was mentally capable of carrying it out. Given his widely criticized debate performance, frequent verbal missteps, and growing calls from within his own party for a leadership change, Leavitt argued this is a question that deserves serious consideration. Still determined to catch Leavitt off guard, Collins fired off yet another challenging question.
You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m., but he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing. A verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well, there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court.
Now this is where things get really interesting. As part of Trump's renewed crackdown on illegal immigration, a series of deportation flights were scheduled and took off as planned. But here's what most people don't realize: progressive legal groups had already rushed to court, urgently seeking an injunction to stop those flights. According to Kaitlan Collins, the injunction was verbally granted around 6:30 p.m., but by the time the official written ruling was filed, the planes had already departed around 7:40 p.m. So, did Trump actually defy a court order? Karoline Leavitt had a sharp response. She noted that Trump's legal team is now reviewing whether a verbal ruling holds the same legal weight as a written one, a fair and important legal question. But here's the bigger issue: why are some journalists seemingly more outraged about the deportation of illegal immigrants than the fact that many of them have criminal records? It raises a deeper question about media priorities. Rather than asking why individuals with serious charges are allowed to remain in the country illegally, much of the media narrative has focused on portraying Trump as the villain for enforcing immigration law. It's a striking contradiction, especially from those who often champion defending democracy, yet appear willing to overlook legal processes when it suits their agenda.
So on Friday, the president suggested at length that it should be illegal to criticize judges, but he has repeatedly criticized judges who rule against him, and Elon Musk is calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two things not in conflict?
I have not heard the president talk about impeaching judges. I know you mentioned Mr. Musk's tweet, but I have not heard the president of the United States ask that.
And the misinformation just keeps coming. When has President Trump ever said it should be illegal to criticize judges? Answer: never. Yet that hasn't stopped some in the media from shamelessly pushing this false narrative. It started during Trump's first presidential run, and now that he's back in the White House, the attacks have only intensified. This isn't just about twisting his words anymore, it's about outright fabrication. But Karoline Leavitt isn't just articulate, she's a force armed with facts. In her latest appearance, she didn't just push back, she dismantled the media's smear campaign, calling out the way journalism has been replaced with activism. She exposed how certain outlets have abandoned objectivity in favor of agenda-driven narratives designed to tear Trump down at every turn. Let's be honest, if criticizing judges were truly a crime, half the liberal pundits would be behind bars for their constant attacks on conservative justices. So why the double standard? Why is it called free speech when the left does it, but labeled dangerous rhetoric when Trump speaks? That's the question the media refuses to answer. What they seem to forget is that both President Trump and his press secretary have pledged to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. You remember that clip, right?
And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server, and Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
Now you see why Karoline Leavitt never hesitates to call out the blatant BS from the legacy media the moment she catches them twisting the truth. She's been in the trenches and knows exactly how the woke press operates, and just how far they're willing to go. That's why she didn't just challenge Kaitlan Collins and Sean Spicer, she completely obliterated them for their blatantly biased reporting on the White House. Let's be honest, the mainstream media isn't about reporting facts anymore. Their mission isn't to deliver the news, it's to shape the narrative, distort reality, and gaslight the public into buying their fabricated version of events. Every time Karoline exposes their lies, the media loses more credibility. That's why they can't stand her. She doesn't just debunk their nonsense, she destroys it with facts, confidence, and an unwavering composure that leaves them scrambling for a response. And here's the best part, the American people see right through the deception. They know when the media is pushing propaganda, and they're fed up with the lies. That's why the press keeps failing, and why Karoline Leavitt remains one of the biggest threats to their entire operation.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask about this video I saw this morning set to the tune of, I believe, Closing Time, about deportations of illegal migrants. What's the strategy behind the White House's videos they've been putting out on this, and can you kind of talk us through the thinking on these videos?
Sure. I think the White House and our entire government clearly is leaning into the message of this president. And we are unafraid to double down and to take responsibility and ownership of the serious decisions that are being made. The president was elected with an overwhelming mandate to launch the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and that's exactly what he is doing.
And this is exactly why people love Trump, and why they voted for him in droves. He made a clear promise during his campaign to crack down on illegal immigration and reduce crime, and now he's delivering on every single word. Unlike the previous administration, which offered nothing but empty rhetoric while quietly allowing millions of illegal immigrants to cross the border, Trump isn't here to play games. He's taking decisive action, making tough decisions, and following through on every commitment he made to the American people. Here's the kicker, he's got the receipts. The left-wing media can complain all they want, but Trump has undeniable video evidence backing his actions. The numbers don't lie, crime rates tied to illegal immigration have surged. Yet, the same media that claims to care about safety and democracy refuses to address the real issue. Trump isn't just enforcing the law, he's exposing the hypocrisy of those who have been undermining America's borders for years. And that's exactly why the establishment, the media, and the radical left are terrified.
And that's exactly what he is doing. And to this very day, we are now, I think, 56 or 7 days into the administration by my count. The president still receives an overwhelming public support for the policies that he is enacting. So we are unafraid to message effectively what the president is doing on a daily basis to make our communities safer. And the specific video you referenced, I think it sums up our immigration policy pretty well. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
And that's exactly why the mainstream media is in full meltdown mode. No matter how many hit pieces they publish, how many fake scandals they try to push, or how hard they smear him, Trump's support keeps growing, and that drives them absolutely crazy. For years, they told us Trump was finished. They swore his political career was over. But guess what? The people never bought their lies. They see right through the propaganda, the double standards, and the desperate attempts to paint Trump as a villain while ignoring the real failures of the establishment. Now that Trump's back in action, the media is panicking. They've lost control of the narrative, and they know it. No wonder they're more desperate than ever to take him down. It's their last pathetic attempt to stay relevant. And with that, folks, we're wrapping up today's video. If you liked it, hit that like button and subscribe for more sharp commentary like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.